Hi, I'm Erica Boucher and I'm here to teach you how to sew on a button today. So a little background about me, I actually grew up sewing with my grandmother and mother. So I learned how to sew on a button at a pretty young age, and I learned a lot of other skills from them that I still use today. And I feel like sewing on a button is something that everyone should learn how to do. So I'm going to take you through a few different steps on how to do this today. So first we're going to start off with our preparation. So what do we need to complete this task and learn this new skill? And then I'm going to actually go through the steps of actually sewing on the button. And then after that, we're just going to discuss really quickly, how did it go? How are you going to continue to use this new skill? All right, so let's get started. So what do we need to sew on a button? Well, we need the garment that the button came off of. So in my case, I have a white button-up shirt, and the button came off of the cuff. So we can see here, there's a few holes where the button came out. And lucky for me, I still have the button. So that's your next thing you need is the button. And if for some reason you don't have the button, you can always pick one up at a craft store. You can either pick something similar, or if you want to challenge yourself, you can change out all the buttons on the shirt and do something new. And then you're going to need a needle, your basic metal sewing needle, and some thread that's going to match the garment. So in my case, I have a white shirt, so I have white thread. You can also pick up both these items at a craft store if you don't have them. And then we'll just need some scissors to cut the thread. Okay. So those are the things that we need to sew on the button. So now let's go through the actual steps of sewing the button on. So we're going to take our thread, and what I like to do is cut off 2 equally long pieces and put them together on my needle. This helps with not quite as many repetitions of sewing the button on, because you already have 2 strands on your needle. So it looks something like this, where you have 2 strands together. And then you can thread them through the eye of the needle. That's the little hole at the end of the needle. So it's going to look like this. And you'll have a little tail of the extra that comes through. You want that to be about halfway down. And then the bottom thread, you're going to tie in a knot. So that way, when you pull the needle with the thread through, it stays on your garment and your button. Because that's the point, right? We don't want the button to fall off. So now that we have our thread on our needle, that's our first step in sewing. We're going to locate, pick up the button and locate where it goes on the garment. Now, one thing to note about buttons is there's a couple different types of buttons. This happens to be a button with 4 holes. You can see that. Now, there are buttons that have 2 holes. Some of them have like the little toggle at the end that you'll sew through. So you'll just have to figure out what type of button you have and go use that accordingly. For this example, we have the 4-hole button, and you typically make a pattern of an X on top of the button. So place the button where it goes. I like to start at the bottom right, but you can start in any hole that you want. So you're gonna pick the hole, go through the shirt, up through that hole in the button, and pull the thread all the way through until it stops. Okay, so once you have that through, then your thread's coming up through the top now. And now you're gonna start to make that first slash of the X. So since I started at the bottom right, I'm gonna now put my needle down through the top left. So that's gonna be that diagonal. So you're gonna select that, push your needle through, and then pull until you can't pull any longer. Now, when you look at your button, you're gonna see that diagonal line there, that first slash of the X. So then you're gonna pick one of the other holes that hasn't had the thread go through it yet. I'm gonna go for the bottom left. So I'm gonna poke my needle up through the bottom, pull it through the top, and then now we're gonna go over to the top right so I can complete that X shape. So now you can see there's the X shape with the thread on top of the button. Okay, so now you're gonna continue this a couple more times. I like to do it at least 3 more times. And you're gonna try to go in the same holes that you did previously, so that keeps it nice and neat on the back as well. So you continue to go through this. Okay, so now that we've done that X a few more times, you can see it's starting to come up a little bit higher on the button. We can see the thread a lot more. So now when we feel like we've got it good and secure, and we ended where our thread is coming out the bottom, not the top. So you want to end where the thread's coming out the bottom. We're just going to secure the rest of the thread. So we're going to take just a little piece of fabric on the bottom and put our needle through that, just kind of like a little piece. So pull your thread through until you have a little loop. So I have this little loop here, and then I'm going to take my needle and pull it through that loop, and that's going to create a little knot. And I'm going to do that just a couple of times, and that's going to help secure down the thread that I just put through the button. Because again, we don't want the button to fall off again. That's our goal, right? So now I've done that twice. So I'm going to pick up my scissors now, and I'm going to cut off the excess thread. But I'm going to leave just a little tail on here because I don't want it to come off and come undone with that knot. So I left just a little bit of a tail there. Okay, so now we've gone through all the steps of how to put the button on, how to sew it on, and now we're going to just double check a couple things. So what you can do to make sure you feel like the button is secure is kind of wiggle it a little bit. Make sure it's on there. Is it any threads coming up? Does it feel loose at all? If it does, you may want to try it again. And that's okay, because what we're doing is you're learning something new, and when you learn something new, you can make mistakes, and that's really when you're going to learn the most, and you're going to really take that in and say, okay, I need to do something different next time. So once you feel like that's secure, you can also then put it through the buttonhole that it goes with. Does it still look like it lines up correctly? Does that look okay? So yeah, it looks good. All right, so now you've successfully sewn a button on, so yay, congratulations. So what I want you to think about next is, what are you going to do with this new skill? How are you going to continue to use it and hone in on it? So with any new skill, it takes practice, right? So what I want you to do is think of ways that you can use this new skill. Do you have other garments that need buttons sewn on, or maybe they're starting to come loose, so you could go ahead and cut them off and re-sew them on before you do lose them. Maybe you have some extra buttons laying around and some old clothing, and you could practice sewing on a button that way. You could also ask friends and family, do they need help with having a button sewn on something? So try to think of different ways that you can continue to use this skill. And I really hope you enjoyed learning this new skill with me today, and thanks for joining me.